kids see what you're doing and they're going to
Mm-hmm.
model behavior based on what their parents do. And for him, he just wanted to be like his mom. So I think that that can translate to many parts of our life, including money. Like if
Yeah.
your kids see you saving money, if they see you, if you're having conversations about it, you're not making it a bad thing to talk about.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm Marianne, your host for Unpacked and Empowered Finances. This is the podcast where we unpack the complexities of money. And today we're going to talk about the money stories that shape how we build wealth. Before we jump in, if you enjoy simple, judgment free conversations about money, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel or follow the podcast. And as always, everything I share here is for general education only, not personalized financial or insurance advice, and it doesn't replace a real conversation about your specific situation. Today we have a special guest, and he's been on the podcast before, and his name is Greg Keith, a certified financial planner. Greg Keith has over 20 years of experience in the financial industry. He's focused on retirement planning and wealth preservation for people who are over 50 years old and up. And he is also the founder of the Visual Wealth Project, where his drawings are really great and simplifies financial concepts. So, welcome to the podcast, Greg.
Well, thank you, Marianne.
This is a two-part episode, as we discussed. So, the first part of this podcast is we're just going to tackle the money stories that we believe and how it affects us in the wealth building stage, the early part of how we're going to accumulate wealth so that we can actually enjoy retirement. And then in the next episode, we're going to be talking about how do these money beliefs or psychological beliefs that we have affect how we spend on retirement or how we preserve our wealth on retirement so we can live a joyful life. So I meet so many young parents who want to build wealth, but they are usually carrying beliefs that they didn't choose. So, how much of what you see in the people that you work with comes back to the money stories that they've inherited growing up?
So I don't think people realize how common that is, how they were raised with money, and how that will affect how they interact with money or their relationship with money as an adult. There's been a lot of research that has been done with this. There was a study by Clance and Britt, and they called it Money Scripts. And it's just about when your core beliefs about money are formed. And it discusses that most people's core beliefs around money are formed by age 7, which might be surprising to some of your listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, like, where that shows up in real life is like, I'll tell you a story about a client that I've worked with. We'll call him Mark. That's not his name, but we're not going to share his real name on the podcast. But he was a tech guy making great money in a tech job in his 30s, and he was saving a lot of money, but it was sitting in cash. And
Mm-hmm.
he really was in a position where he should have been aggressively growing his wealth. He's young, good income, not a lot of family responsibilities yet. It was really a prime time for him to get a great foundation on his investing and his wealth building. What happened with Mark is his father had an awful experience with money. So he remembers his father in 2000 crash, and his father, if for those who remember, a lot of clients, if you're younger, you may not have lived through it, but in 2008, depending on which stock market you followed, they crashed roughly 50%. So if you had all of your money hypothetically invested in a stock portfolio, it's
Mm-hmm.
reasonable that your your portfolio would have dropped by 50% in 2008. So that had a negative effect on a lot of people, and people had to make some changes in their lives that weren't comfortable. They may have had to go back to work. They may have had to reduce their spending if they were already in retirement. They also may have had to work a few extra years just because their portfolio had dropped so much and it was so uncertain. So that was Mark's memory. His father was
Mm-hmm.
stressed out. There was a lot of comments about how the stock market was, all it did was made you lose your money. It was a scam, those types of things. So unknowingly, that was creating Mark's money story. So that was in the back of his head. So it took some time for us to get to a point where I really was able to uncover the issue and the feelings of how he felt. And then we were able to ask the right questions about the difference between his and his father's situation, his age and his time horizon, and properly structuring a portfolio so he can avoid what his father went through in 2008.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that sometimes just inheriting that belief is quite, I can say, money is dangerous mindset. It can lead to us like how we would go ahead moving forward, right? So, like in the decisions that we're going to make. Now, have you helped individuals who grew up in a household where there's lack of money or money isn't even talked about? Then how does it affect their decisions that they face today?
Like, I think the core message is not growing up with money or growing up poor, I guess. I don't believe that necessarily shapes your money mindset, but your brain gets wired for right now because in those situations, you're just trying to figure out how to put food on the table. You're trying to figure out how to pay next month's mortgage. So I think you're constantly in that heightened state of I don't know if you call it fear, but like I think there's a trauma to that. It's if
Mm.
you grew up in a household where maybe your parents are constantly trying to figure out how are we going to take care of the bills tomorrow. There's no room in their brain or their thought process to think about 10 years down the road or retirement.
Mhm.
They're just in survival mode. So if that's your experience, maybe you are doing quite well. But if that's what you grew up in, the wiring, it's hard to change that wiring from right now to what's going on in the future. So you can see that in people who they have more than enough resources. They have great incomes. They have large balances in their bank accounts, but there's a fear of spending because they're so
Mhm.
uncertain about tomorrow. So which can be a problem for them long term. If you're not investing extra money, you're not keeping pace with inflation. Every dollar that stays in a savings account for a year literally goes backwards in value with inflation. So I think that having that mindset of it's a scarcity thing, I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring and I don't want to make the wrong decision. It can really have a negative impact on your long term planning. The other thing is avoidance. Like a lot of
Mhm.
people just avoid making decisions. They don't look at their statements. They don't open the mail. They don't log into their online accounts. I think it's because of maybe there's a sense of trauma around how they grew up with money that I mean, in behavioral finance, they call it the ostrich effect. So you basically bury your head in the sand and don't think about it because thinking about it brings up bad memories and causes pain.
And I want to add as well, like sometimes these memories, and I'm someone who actually also grew up with like there's not enough because raised by a single income household, my solo parent, and I can say that it can go both ways. So one person could be like because you grew up lacking, once you have that money to spend, you're either gonna spend so much on your kids or on your children or the life that you have now, or you're
Mm,
gonna be, oh no, I'm gonna hold on to it because what happens if there's a loss, like when I was growing up. So I think that's also a big thing. Like there should be like a kind of a balance between are you gonna splurge more because you didn't have that growing up? Or are you gonna be like an aunt who just keeps saving for the rainy day. So I think there should be a good balance to that. Not just based on our money script, I mean, but rather how do we use those negative experiences to make our positive future, I guess.
yeah.
There's a lot more about that because if there's already trauma, then that's something that has to be worked on in a deeper setting. In today's age, there's also a lot of information online. There's books, podcasts, there's YouTube, TikTok, and social media. And there are lots of what we call finfluencers. So, how can someone tell whether a financial advice actually fits their own situation instead of just simply being persuasive or because this is a sponsored something for a company that they're working for.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of noise on social media. There's a lot of fantastic financial advice that's available, and there's also a lot that's not so fantastic. Like bad advice may not be bad advice for one person, but it could be terrible advice for someone in a completely different situation. So I do see that a lot, even with some of the well known big financial influencers who are very educated and very, very smart and giving good advice. But if you're not in the situation that they're advising, it could be the wrong advice for you. So I would say the question you want to ask first is who is this advice about for? So if you're watching, we'll use Dave Ramsey as an example. So a lot of his content is creating around aggressively reducing your debt. And I think he's done a fantastic job for a lot of people. But that advice is not going to translate well to somebody who owns a business and a company and doesn't have debt and they're trying to figure out estate planning needs. And it just becomes a lot more complex than that. Like I said, Dave Ramsey's audience is mainly people who are trying to get out of debt, people who are overwhelmed with money. That's not everybody. Some people are at the
Mm.
opposite of that. So just because he's giving good advice doesn't mean it's good advice for you. So I'd be cautious about that. The other thing too is there's some fantastic social media personalities out there that don't have a lot of education, credentials. They don't have the knowledge to be giving the advice that they're giving, but they're on camera, they're good looking, persuasive, they're confident. So don't confuse confidence with correctness. Like, I don't think that just because it sounded good, I mean, these YouTube shorts and Instagram shorts, they're basically commercials, right? And well done. I mean, they're there to sell you something. So I think you want to um, do a little research on your own, reach out to a trusted professional to make sure that it fits your situation, and just be careful because there's a lot of good advice out there, a lot of bad advice, and you want to make sure that what you're following is one, correct, and two, that it fits into your specific situation. And I guess the last one would be like make sure it works with real numbers. It's great to watch somebody. You'll see graphs and charts, and I'm one of the people that post some of them. But if you save $2,000 a month for X number of years, you're going to be a millionaire. Well, that's great if you can do that. But if you've got $250 a month to save or $50 a month to save, there's a lot of good data and education there. But you've got to make sure it works with your numbers, and you've got to use your numbers to figure out where am I where am I going? Like, what can I accomplish? What's realistic? What's a reasonable goal to set? Because if you're using somebody else's target, it's probably not going to work out too well for you. So yeah, I would say, like, I see that with clients all the time. And it's not just influencers. They heard something at work or somebody, their uncle told them something or they saw it on TikTok. Yeah, not necessarily that it's all bad advice. It's does it suit you and does it fit your specific situation?
I've been hearing a lot of people also like they're investing into this particular ETF and oh yeah, I made some money here so far and that's great, right? The only thing is when you don't really look at your own cash flow, like this what you're doing right now, investing in the market, does it match what you have currently? Like you said, what's your numbers look like? What does your goal look like? And are these activities actually going to help you in your own personal situation? And these are the types of things that we we help people with as someone in the investment space or financial planning space. We want to look at what this person actually like how can they withstand any loss when they're invested in the markets, or do they have enough cushion, or do they have emergency funds? Because sometimes the tendency is people would be like, oh, this is the one that's very popular right now, so I'd invest on it, and then they lose money. That gives then the mindset of what we discussed earlier, that you're thinking, oh, okay, yeah, I know what, that's a scam.
Yeah.
Don't you agree? So we want to prevent that from happening because not all things are scam. It's probably because you were not ready when you did it at the time. So it's really important to take a look at what really applies to me rather than what's popular out there.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
that what you just touched on can be true in the opposite as well. Like,
mhm,
I've met with individuals, and because of what they read in the news or something happened to the neighbors, somebody that had been affected by a scam or who had been a victim, they're very apprehensive to do anything. So I've had people directly ask me, who is your investment dealer? How do I know they're credible? How do I look at your licensing online? And that's fine. Like, I don't get offended by that. I think that it's smart to do your due diligence and make sure you have a good understanding of who you're working with, the licenses that they hold, the organizations that they're representing, because really most financial institutions in Canada, they're credible, they're insured, there's not any issues there. I mean, there's some great companies out there. There's some that don't align with the way I work, but when it comes to all the proper legalities and having their teams and their employees properly licensed and properly insured with errors and emissions insurance, like there's very few companies that aren't meeting those that standard. When it comes to
mhm.
advice, that's different conversation. So many different organizations have different philosophies around advice, and I agree with some and I don't with others. But when it comes to, is this a scam or it's not, there's not a lot of companies out there I would caution people to stay away from when it comes to them being a scam. But there's also a lot of people out there. I mean, we all get those text messages and they just don't look right. I mean, I had one last week and it said my CIBC bank account had been compromised. I don't have a CIBC bank account. So you've got to be careful with that kind of thing.
Thank you for sharing that. And you often say that doing nothing feels safe.
Yep.
And you mentioned this earlier about sometimes they don't make a decision because they just want to feel safe. I think young families experience that too, that they should start investing or making a financial plan, but because of the fear, they're not doing anything. So, what's happening psychologically when people feel stuck?
Yeah. And to speak to the fear, one thing that's, I mean, I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to this stuff, and I really enjoy the psychology of finance and behavioral finance. But one thing that shows up over and over again is humans feel the loss of money twice as much as they feel the joy of growing money and gaining interest. So the pain hurts twice as bad as the good feelings feel, which is why so many people are scared to make the wrong move. Maybe they've made the wrong move in the past, and that memory of making a mistake and losing some money is just so deeply ingrained in them that it paralyzes the decision making. That is one thing. People just feel the pain of a loss more than they feel the joy of a gain. And I think it's also present bias. So if things are going well, like life's pretty good, bills are paid, we've got a little bit of money in the bank, we're going on a vacation every year, everyone's happy. I think a lot of people in that present moment, their mind is telling them, why would we change anything right now? Like,
Yeah.
why, like we don't want to mess this up. Like this is going pretty good. And you see that a lot with, like, I definitely recommend people have emergency funds, and people keep, a good amount of cash on hand in case something comes up that you weren't expecting. But oftentimes I see people's emergency funds turn into, large accounts that are way bigger than they should be. And there's a fear of anything with it because, if you've got 50,000, $100,000 sitting in a savings account, putting that into something that has the potential to fluctuate on a daily basis can cause a lot of stress.
Mhm.
And I find that the media is really our worst enemy when it comes to this type of thing. If you had have watched Fox or CNN or MSNBC or even the Canadian news, they're never telling you about all the great opportunities and all the good things that are happening in the investment world. It's more about, they'll have economists on there talking about the potential for loss and we're going to see the biggest crash in history. And I mean, we hear that every single year, and some years that will be true. Like in
Mhm.
2008, that was true. But I'm thinking of an individual I met specifically, and I met him in 2020. And he was very scared just because of the political climate and everything that was going on in the world. And he has a significant amount of money sitting in cash. And now he's in a position where, I talk to him probably once a year, maybe a little bit more. And he felt some regret in 2021 and thought, well, like, yeah, I missed out, but the news is saying this. And then in 2022, we
And we
saw
do.
we saw a little bit of a downturn. So then he felt validated by his decision. He felt like I made the right call. But since then, the market has literally been on fire. Like 23,
Mhm.
24, 26. Like we've seen incredible growth. And now he's feeling that regret. But what it always comes back to is, well, I don't want to buy when it's too high. And all it's been doing is going up. Well, we've been saying that for 2 or 3 years. And with that mentality, you've lost so much growth. So it's really a hard thing to mentally navigate. And I'm certainly not a psychologist, but I mean, that present bias and that fear of losing what I already have plays such a big role in the psychology of investing. And I mean, we can show people numbers and graphs and charts all day, but people don't live in spreadsheets. They live in their brain. So it can be tough.
Yeah, I definitely. Sometimes, well, you're just holding on to something that's really safe, right? But what are the effects of what you're doing? So,
Exactly.
how can someone recognize they're making decisions based on an old money story or an old money script instead of their current reality? And what's one practical first step toward making more intentional financial decisions?
That's a tough question, but I think it's asking yourself. I think a lot of this goes back to your upbringing when it comes to how we make decisions. And I think it's really important to kind of like deeply think about this and think if I'd grown up different, would I still be thinking this way? And I think it also helps bringing in person to have a look at things because what we feel and what the reality is honestly doesn't always align. And I think we see
Mhm.
that with personal lives too. If you're not talking about finance, like you might feel a certain way, and the way you feel may not actually be the reality of what's going on at all. It's just past experiences, and they're going to live inside of your brain and they're going to be there when you make decisions going forward. So I think it's really important to focus on like, where are these feelings coming from? Where am I at right now? And does this make sense for who I am, not who I was yesterday? I mean, we're humans. We're not going to always make perfect decisions with everything. But I think if you can regularly look at that picture, if you're using the same money habits that you had 10 years ago when you were making $40,000 and now you're making $90,000 and you haven't changed anything, I think it's just about putting the data in front of you and then asking yourself those tough questions like, why am I making these decisions? Are these 2016 decisions based on what was going on then, or are they 2026 decisions based on what's going on now? And I think just being aware of where your money story or where your thoughts on money comes from. Because I think if
Mhm.
you understand like the reason I feel this way is because I grew up without much, or the way I feel this way is because my father wouldn't spend anything, even though we had more than we needed. So a lot of that stuff I think it just gets programmed in our brains. Like for myself personally, my father was a financial advisor. He still is working actually as a financial advisor, and he did not like spending money at all when I was a kid. So he made like a very good income. My mother also worked, and but he wouldn't buy, like, I'm not talking about buying a new car, but he wouldn't buy a decent car. Like he would drive 10, 12-year-old cars that he could buy for a couple $1,000s, and like there were other things like that too where in my mind I was thinking like, why are we doing this? Like I knew, especially as I got older as a teenager, I'm thinking I know he has the income and the ability to do things that might make his life easier and he might enjoy more. um Not sure I completely understood that because I don't think a nicer car would have brought him joy. Things were never important to him. But that affected me kind of in the opposite way. When I started making a decent income, I wanted nice things. So
Which is
I would,
normal.
I went out and bought I think probably 2014. Like I remember going out and buying a brand new Acura and thinking like, oh, this is beautiful. And it was something that I never got to experience. The way that he used money and the way that he thought about money honestly programmed me the opposite way. So everybody's a little different, but I think for me to understand that now, like over time, that car was amazing at the time. I thought I'd made it. I thought I was pretty cool. But then, like now, 12 years later, cars don't really excite me at all anymore. You know what I mean? So I think just recognizing when we evolve, how we change, where money beliefs come from, and doing the best to make responsible decisions as we evolve through our lives.
And also not comparing things with other people. Like you said, your father, actually, I admire your father in that sense that things don't really matter to him as much. But I don't know, did he give you experiences that probably was more enjoyable in your childhood rather than things? Because sometimes
Oh,
it's not the money, it's not the things that we see, but the things that we experience.
and that's true. Like my father was very involved in our lives. He coached our sports teams. We went on several family vacations throughout the summer. You know, he was present, like he was there all the time. Like it's not he was a good father. Now, but there are I think that just as humans we tend to focus on the negative. Like we don't humans just seem to be wired to and I remember we'd be camping as so I come from a family of 5. I have 2 siblings. So we'd be camping in Mactaquac, which is just outside of Fredericton, which was a place we went to a lot. And we had this giant 10-person tent that was
Oh.
probably 25 years old. And it was musty and old and stunk. And we'd be camping with my cousins and other family, and they'd have a trailer and they'd have a nice, in my mind, I'm thinking, like, why are we sleeping in this tent? Like, what is he doing? And it almost comes to like, why is he punishing us? And so it's funny because when I think back to it, I'm like, those were some of the best trips I ever went on. But I focused, like, some of my focus was, why do I have to sleep in this stinky old tent? So, and I remember thinking the same thing like when I got my driver's license in high school. It's like, okay, like my father had a couple older cars that had seen better days and he didn't care. He was fine with that. And, all of my peers were getting their driver's license, and some of them are showing up at school driving their dad's brand new truck. And I'm showing up driving a 1986 Chrysler K car and thinking, like, yeah, like I think there probably was a little bit of embarrassment there, which is so silly. And like, obviously, I had some entitlement.
Mm.
Yeah, like I think like as I age, the value of those lessons has become more and more important to me. Like in the beginning, I was like, I'm not doing this. Like I'm gonna buy what I want and do what I want. But I think you just grow up and figure out what's important. So
Yeah, I agree. And if you could leave one message about building wealth and raising financially confident kids, what would it be?
I think you want to involve your kids in money discussions, talk openly about it with them, let them see you and your partner, your spouse talk openly about money. Um, Maybe let them contribute to some of the decisions. Maybe if we're going to buy this toy or that toy, or if we're going to go to this restaurant or that restaurant, and talk about the costs associated with making these different decisions and how if we do one thing, we won't be able to do the other thing. And I honestly think sharing some small wins when it comes to money, but also talking openly about mistakes you've made with money and help them understand and show them that it's okay to make a mistake, but also they can learn something from the mistakes you've made and not make the same mistake when they're an adult. So I guess I would say don't make money a taboo conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think that it's important to openly discuss money in your household, with your kids, with your spouse as well, and just create a healthy dialogue around money.
I'm glad that you said we can always learn from our mistakes and teach our children that way, because I think financial confidence, it's not really like we're teaching kids specifically. They
Mm,
also, like, yes, we can teach them as much as we can share information, like all the good things that you just mentioned. At the same time, if they catch us having some, like, what are our reactions when things happen? So
mm,
I can say financial confidence is also caught by their eyes. And it's not like we're blaming ourselves if it affects them negatively in the future, but it's a good point that you said, like teaching
yeah,
them how we can back up from those mistakes going forward. So I think you brought some really great points there. So thank you. Thank you
yeah.
for sharing.
Oh, no problem. And just to add, like I noticed this the other day, completely unrelated to finance, but
Hmm.
my wife, I wouldn't say she's a runner, but she goes for a run once in a while and she regularly exercises. And a couple days ago, I was in the car with my son and we were driving home and he asked me to drop him off a street before our street so he could run and race the car home.
Wow.
so
Wow.
so I think what I'm getting at is kids see what you're doing and they're going to
Hmm.
model behavior based on what their parents do. And for him, he just wanted to be like his mom. So I think that that can translate to many parts of our life, including money. Like if
Yeah,
kids see you saving money, if they see you, if you're having conversations about it, you're not making it a bad thing to talk about. I think that the younger you can start doing that with your children, the better.
absolutely. I like that example. And it reminds me to eat healthy because
There you go. Yeah.
if my children always sees me eating like junk, then they'd probably learn that thing. So it not just applies to finance, but yes, overall life in general. They see what we do, what they see what we project, and it's gonna affect them somehow in the future. So again,
Yeah.
thanks so much for being here, Greg, and we look forward to having you again on the next discussion where we talk about the money decisions or the money behaviors that affect us in retirement.
That's wonderful. And thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to chatting again soon.
So, I'm hosting a free 1 hour lunch and learn webinar called Protecting What Matters Estate Planning. And this is happening on Thursday, August 20th at 12 noon Atlantic time, right at lunchtime. So, we're breaking down why every parent needs a will, even if you don't think you have big assets, what actually happens to your children and stuff you owe or own if something unexpected happens, and how to plan ahead for health or financial incapacity. So, this is totally free and designed for busy parents who've been putting this off. You can definitely register using the link in the show notes below. If today's episode was helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe, leave a review, or share it with another busy mom who could use a little encouragement today. Those small actions help this podcast reach more families, and they mean more than you think. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Until next time, remember, one conversation, one decision, one step at a time. That's what becoming unpacked and empowered is all about.